It was too quiet for a hearing that had been choreographed like a political ambush. Room 2141, inside the Rayburn House office building, breathed heavy with tension. Not loud, just dense. Like a courtroom just before the verdict. Except here, the trial hadn't even officially begun. Cameras whispered red, reporters leaned forward in their seats, fingers already resting on keys. Staffers passed files like stagehands behind a curtain. At the center of it all, Jim Jordan sat stiff, his shirt sleeves rolled up like he'd earned sweat. His fingers drummed a slow beat across his folder, the sound oddly rhythmic. He wasn't preparing for justice. He was preparing for a show. And across from him, Jasmine Crockett knew it. 3 seats down, she waited in silence, braids tucked neatly behind her shoulders, a yellow folder perfectly aligned before her. Her expression read as neutral, but there was nothing passive about her presence. She knew what this was. A setup, a script, a trap with her name already printed in bold on the call sheet. Jordan leaned into his mic, a theatrical pause hanging before his voice sliced through the room. This committee convenes today to evaluate disturbing patterns of bias and selective enforcement within the Department of Justice, he began, particularly as it pertains to members of the Biden family. Every word was controlled, slow, weighted to land like accusations disguised as inquiry. He looked down, then back up. Too often identity has been used as armor, he added. But today, we're not playing defense. We're asking questions. His eyes moved toward Jasmine for just a fraction of a second. Calculated. Measuring. He didn't say her name, yet, but everyone knew who he meant. Jasmine didn't flinch. Jordan continued, this time letting the bait show more clearly. We'll be reviewing actions and statements by certain members of this committee. Actions that suggest not just bias, but possible conflicts of interest. Now the line was drawn. Now it was open season. Still, Jasmine said nothing. She didn't need to, because predators always misread stillness as weakness. Jordan gestured toward the back wall. A staffer tapped a button, and the lights dimmed slightly. A large monitor hummed on behind him. Let's begin with visual Exhibit A, he said too smoothly. Grainy footage played, Hunter Biden entering a federal building. Then clips of Department of Justice officials speaking at different press conferences, stitched together like a campaign ad. Headlines in bold red flashed across the screen. DOJ silent on Biden family investigation. No sound, just drama. Then it cut to black. Jordan faced forward. When our justice system picks favorites, he said, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes compromised. Then he turned, fully now, to face her. Congresswoman Crockett, do you stand by your defense of the Department of Justice in light of these patterns? The pause was intentional, the framing perfect for a soundbite. A dozen pens lifted in anticipation. Jasmine didn't reach for her mic, didn't glance toward her staff, didn't even shift in her seat. She blinked. Once, slowly, then turned a page in her folder. Jordan narrowed his eyes. Do you have a comment? He pressed. Nothing, just silence. But it wasn't empty. It was loaded. A kind of quiet that builds pressure in every corner of a room without ever lifting a voice. Jordan leaned closer. Congresswoman? She looked up, met his stare, but didn't speak. And just like that, the rhythm of the hearing wobbled. Because this wasn't how the script was written. He expected a spark, a reaction, something he could cut into clips and headlines. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't reacting. She was waiting, holding. And just like that, the room began to hold with her. Outside, the sky over D.C. had begun to darken, clouds thick with summer threat. Inside, something colder had settled. It wasn't resistance. It was readiness. Because she didn't come to defend her presence. She came to dismantle his premise. What happened in the next 30 minutes didn't just resolve a tense public standoff. It revealed something that would change how America saw her forever. Comment if you've ever witnessed silent injustice. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe if you're ready for more truths told in silence. The soundstage had never felt so still. Jeanine Pirro reached for the cue cards again, but her fingers moved slower now, each motion deliberate, as if touching anything too fast might crack the illusion of control she wore like makeup. The NDA on the table between them might as well have been a live wire. Her gaze hovered over it, then flicked toward the cameras, gauging what the audience might already know, what she could still pretend away. Jasmine didn't move. She didn't need to. The truth was already walking the room. Jeanine cleared her throat. Congresswoman Crockett, I invited you here in good faith. This document, whatever it is, was not part of the scheduled segment. Jasmine didn't look at her. She looked at the cameras now, her voice composed, clipped like trial dialogue. It's real. And if you're concerned about timing, I suggest you speak with your former employer. They wrote the check. A low murmur rolled through the audience. Not outrage, not yet, but curiosity turning cold. The studio's usual rhythm, the polite applause, the rehearsed laughter, had drained away. Even the stage lights seemed to dim under the weight of the moment. Jeanine rallied. Let's not play trial here. You have no proof this was to silence anyone. Networks make decisions for 1,000 reasons. And yet this one, Jasmine interrupted, came 6 days after Malik's death. You were scheduled to run a segment. It was pulled. The footage? Buried. Jeanine tried to smile, but it cracked under pressure. I make editorial decisions every day. That doesn't mean conspiracy. Jasmine's voice dropped a register. Then why was it sealed? Silence again. Behind the scenes, the control room buzzed with frantic whispers. A producer signaled to cut to commercial, but the floor manager hesitated. They knew. Something was happening that didn't fit between advertisements. Jeanine shifted tactics. Let's get back to accountability, she said, her tone now edged with condescension. You've defended violent offenders, drug traffickers. You've been accused of playing the race card to shield criminals. There it was, the deflection, the standard script. But Jasmine only tilted her head slightly, like a prosecutor hearing a bad alibi. She spoke slowly. The race card? I didn't invent the deck. I just learned how to read what was already written. Jeanine leaned forward, sharp now. Do you deny that your legal firm represented clients with violent records? Jasmine didn't blink. Do you deny taking $350,000 to keep a dead boy off the air? Jeanine recoiled, not physically, but in the voice and the eyes. She glanced again toward the control booth, but no help came. No rescue. Jasmine continued. His name was Malik Richardson. His mother's name is Tanya. She held his body in the street for 43 minutes before paramedics were allowed through the line. Your team had the footage. Your show had the story. Jeanine opened her mouth. Jasmine cut her off. And you had the silence, bought and paid for. The audience was dead quiet now, not out of discomfort, but awe. The tension was no longer between two women. It was between two Americas. Jeanine tried again, grasping for dignity. I've dedicated my career to law and order. You think you can walk in here and... Jasmine raised a hand, palm open, not aggressive, just final. You don't get to invoke law and order after selling silence. You don't get to talk about justice until you speak the names you were paid to forget. Jeanine's face hardened. You don't know what it's like to be under threat, to be told you can't say things or your career ends. I know exactly what it's like, Jasmine replied, eyes now sharp, voice like ice. But I never took the money. And then she did something that shouldn't have been dramatic but was. She pushed the folder forward, slowly, deliberately, across the table until it touched Jeanine's side. Page 3, she said. The clause that forbids you from airing the body cam footage. The clause that said, content may not be disclosed in any form, in perpetuity. Jeanine stared at the folder like it was burning, and for the first time she was speechless. Behind the camera, one assistant whispered, Do we still have the clip? Another nodded. We do. In 5 minutes, everything would change. The room felt like it had stopped breathing. Jeanine Pirro's fingers hovered above the folder, not touching it. Not yet. It might as well have been radioactive. Her posture was rigid, spine locked upright as if the chair beneath her no longer belonged to her. Jasmine Crockett, by contrast, sat still, composed. The lines of her jaw held steady, her hands clasped lightly in her lap. She wasn't waiting for an answer. She was watching a reckoning unfold. And then she asked the question again. Do you remember April 12, 2016? Her voice wasn't sharp this time. It was gentle, unbearably so, like someone placing flowers on a grave. The room heard it differently now. The date wasn't a reference point anymore. It was an indictment. Jeanine blinked. Slowly, her voice when it came was thin. It was a long time ago. Jasmine nodded. For you, maybe. But for Tanya Richardson, it was yesterday. For her, her son still bleeds on that sidewalk. For her, time hasn't moved. The studio lights hummed faintly overhead. A light in the rafters flickered once, unnoticed. But in the booth, a decision was being made. The producer's voice came through the earpieces. Cue up the footage, all of it, live feed. The floor manager hesitated. Are you sure? Another voice, the executive. Do it. If we pull now, it's a cover-up. On screen, Jeanine shifted. There's no context in that footage. You can't just air it without... Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She simply reached forward and tapped the edge of the table twice. A small silver device embedded in her bracelet blinked. A moment later, the LED screen behind them lit up. Black, then blue. Then grainy, time-stamped footage from a police body cam began to play. April 12, 2016, 7:38 p.m., North Dallas. A sidewalk bathed in late sunlight. Sirens in the distance. And Malik Richardson, slim frame, navy hoodie, hands visible, turning slowly toward a shouted command. The shot came fast. No warning. One, then another. Malik dropped. The camera jolted, not from impact, but from the officer running forward. The screams followed, human, primal, devastating. A woman's voice shattered the audio like glass. Not my baby! Not my baby! Jasmine didn't turn to watch. She had seen it too many times. But Jeanine did. Her eyes locked on the screen as the footage unfolded. The cries, the stillness, the officer's muttering voice. He fit the description. Again and again, like it was a script meant to be recited. In the studio, there was no commentary, no spin, just the raw, unforgiving truth. A 17-year-old boy gunned down, unarmed, unprovoked, unseen, until now. The screen went black again after 48 seconds. And in that silence, something cracked open in the room. Not noise, not outrage, just understanding. The kind of understanding that rewrites everything that came before it. Jeanine's face was pale. You had no right. I had every right, Jasmine said softly now. You lost yours the day you cashed that check. Jeanine's hands trembled, barely. She reached for her water glass, missed slightly, then steadied it with her other hand. I was told it wouldn't help the case, she murmured, almost to herself. I was told it would make things worse. And you believed them, Jasmine replied, because it was easier. A pause, then she leaned in just slightly. But what if I told you Tanya never stopped believing someone would speak, that she kept a copy of that NDA, that she sent it to me last year with one sentence? Maybe you're the one who still remembers my son. Jeanine swallowed hard. The cameras didn't flinch. Neither did Jasmine. And then she delivered the line that would be clipped, looped, and shared across the internet within minutes. You didn't stay silent for peace. You stayed silent for a check. The air left the room. No gasps, just a shared exhale, as if every person in that studio had finally seen something they weren't supposed to see and could no longer unsee it. The control room cut the feed not because they were told to, but because they didn't know what else to do. But it was too late. The footage was already out, uploaded, shared, spreading like fire through dry grass. And the nation was about to remember Malik Richardson. Jeanine Pirro sat frozen beneath the bright studio lights, but the light couldn't save her now. It only made her fear visible. For a woman who had spent decades commanding attention, wielding rhetoric like a gavel, this moment, this silence, felt like exile. Her eyes locked on the folder Jasmine had slid across the table. The embossed seal of Fox Legal still gleamed under the studio glare. And across from her, Jasmine Crockett didn't blink. She had learned long ago that silence could be sharper than the cross-examination. That in a country where receipts were often louder than pleas, it was better to bring the facts and let them speak. Jeanine inhaled slowly. This is slander. You have no idea what kind of legal constraints I was under. Jasmine's gaze didn't waver. You sign that constraint. And for $350,000, you help bury a boy. Jeanine shifted again in her chair, flinching at her own movement. I was advised not to escalate tensions. I was told the family didn't want the attention. Is that what they told you? Jasmine asked. Or what you told yourself to sleep? It landed like a slap, quiet, precise, undeniable. The control booth had gone dark. No instructions came, no floor manager waving hands to steer the conversation. Even the cameramen stood still, uncertain whether they were recording a broadcast or witnessing history. Jeanine gathered herself, palms pressing down on her lap. Her voice tried to regain its authority. You came here to hijack my show. No, Jasmine said, her voice cutting through the stillness. I came here because you hijacked justice. She turned slightly, finally acknowledging the camera. I sat with Tanya. I looked into the face of a woman who never got a phone call, never got an arrest, never even got a headline. But what she did get was a network check with your signature on the silence. Jeanine opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Jasmine reached into her folder again and removed a second sheet. This one a scanned email from Fox News legal counsel to Jeanine dated April 20th, 2016. It read, in part, this matter is now considered closed. As per agreement terms, segment on Malik Richardson will not air. All references to incident are to be shelved indefinitely. Do not engage. Do not comment. She slid it next to the NDA, side by side. Proof not just of silence, but intent. You didn't forget Malik, Jasmine continued. You erased him. On purpose. Jeanine was quiet for a long time, and then, almost in a whisper, she asked, why now? Jasmine sat back, exhaling once. Because I finally had the proof. Because Tanya deserves the truth. And because people like you keep holding microphones while families hold grief. Jeanine's lips parted, but her voice failed her. Jasmine leaned in again, no louder, no angrier, just devastatingly calm. You built a brand on justice, but when justice knocked, you took a payout. She turned toward the audience now, addressing the crowd directly. There are names we don't know, faces we never see. Malik was one of them. But let this be the last day his name is hidden behind someone else's comfort. And then she stood. It wasn't theatrical. It was deliberate. Before she left the frame, she placed one final document on the table. A notarized affidavit from Tanya Richardson. It ended with 6 words. Please help my son be seen. The red tally light above camera 3 flickered once, then cut to black. But in living rooms across the country, people were already typing, searching, sharing. And Malik Richardson's name was finally irrevocably everywhere. The screen went black for a second too long. And then, without transition, without lower third banners or commercial bumpers, the feed lit up again. Only this time, it wasn't a studio shot. It was raw. It was real. The body cam footage rolled. There was no narration, no dramatic scoring, just the mechanical timestamp flickering in the corner, the cold light of early evening, and the trembling frame of an officer's chest came catching the last moments of Malik Richardson's life. He was walking down Eastwood Street, earbuds in, hands at his sides. He wasn't running. He wasn't resisting. He wasn't a threat. And yet the voice shouting from behind the camera was sharp, panicked, preemptively hostile. Hey, stop right there. Hands out. Hands out. Malik turned, and in that half second, before a question could be asked, before a name could be spoken, before the distance between them could even be closed, 2 shots split the audio wide open. Then the scream, not the officer's, his mother's. She had come running. The neighbor's Ring camera caught the echo. Her voice pierced the background, a guttural wail like something ancient, something ripped from the body before the mind could register what had happened. The footage didn't cut away. Not as Tanya Richardson fell to her knees, not as she begged over and over for someone to help, not as officers stood in a loose, uncertain circle around her, some looking down, others deliberately away. The timestamp kept counting. No CPR was rendered, No words of comfort were offered. The paramedics arrived at minute 13. The footage ended with the slow pullback of a second officer's camera, capturing Tanya curled over her son, rocking, her fingers laced into his hoodie like she could hold him in place if she just pressed hard enough. The studio didn't return. Instead, a new screen flashed across the feed. Previously unreleased body cam footage of the Malik Richardson shooting, aired with permission from the Richardson family. Footage courtesy of legal counsel Jasmine Crockett. No applause. No transition music. Just the quiet hum of screens lighting up across the country. And in homes, on buses, in offices and break rooms, people sat stunned, in silence, until the hashtags began. #Justice for Malik. Say his name. She brought the receipts. Jeanine knew within minutes. Clips flooded Twitter. TikTok spliced Jasmine's "You stayed silent for a check" with the gunshots. Instagram Reels paired the NDA with Tanya's sobs. And on YouTube, the broadcast gained 3.2 million views in under 20 minutes. Jeanine's PR team scrambled to respond, but every draft statement read like a confession in slow motion. Denial didn't work. Deflection fell flat. Her image, once armored in courtroom polish, was now pixelated under scrutiny. Because nothing on that footage was exaggerated, nothing was political, it was just death, unjust, unacknowledged, and now unmistakably seen. Meanwhile, Jasmine sat alone backstage in a green room lit too brightly, her phone buzzing nonstop. Dozens of calls, hundreds of texts. Her legal team was already fielding interview requests, but she wasn't celebrating. She was watching the footage again, quietly. Not out of obsession, out of responsibility, to remember every second, to carry it exactly as it was. A producer knocked once, hesitated, then stepped in. "They're asking if you'll come back out," for reaction. Jasmine didn't look away from the screen. "No. They want to know your thoughts." "They saw my thoughts," she said. "They're in the footage." Outside, the studio was in quiet collapse. Jeanine hadn't returned. The crew stood in awkward clumps, uncertain if they were still taping or merely witnesses now. But the internet was surging forward without them. Malik's name was trending #1 in 23 states. And somewhere in South Dallas, Tanya Richardson watched on a borrowed phone, crying, shaking, whispering her son's name into the silence like a prayer finally answered. The studio smelled of tension. Not the staged kind, the kind that comes before applause cues and panel zingers. This was different. Purer, like the air had been sucked out and replaced with the weight of something no one could look away from. Jeanine Pirro still hadn't returned to her chair. Her microphone lay on the table, its red recording light off. Her earpiece had been removed. A script, folded once down the middle, sat limp in her lap. She was in her dressing room now, the door locked. A single assistant waited outside, eyes glued to a phone already overflowing with headlines. And worse, the footage was now being replayed by other networks. CNN aired it with expert commentary. MSNBC brought on a panel of legal analysts. Fox, staggeringly, cut to commercial. But the damage was already viral. Inside the studio, the audience remained seated, murmuring, not moving, unsure if they were still part of a show or simply unwilling to leave the scene of a reckoning. The host chair was empty, but Jasmine remained standing. She hadn't left the room. She stood just off camera, hands loosely clasped in front of her, eyes fixed on the back wall where the footage had just played. A quiet production assistant approached. "Congresswoman, you don't have to stay. We can get you out through the back." Jasmine shook her head. "I'm not hiding. Neither should this." The assistant swallowed hard, nodding. Backstage, Jeanine finally spoke. Her voice cracked, not from volume, but from the weight behind it. "She blindsided me," she said to no one in particular. "This wasn't supposed to be about that." Her assistant ventured gently. "It's not about what you expected, but it was always about that." Jeanine looked in the mirror. Her own reflection stared back, thinner somehow, stripped of the courtroom grandeur she wore so easily. For the first time, she looked less like a brand and more like a person trapped by the choices she once convinced herself were necessary. Outside in the control room, a producer made a quiet decision. Cut to the audience, she said. No hosts, no voices, just reactions. The cameras obeyed. Faces, white, black, young, old, all locked in stunned quiet. A teenager wiped her eyes. A man in a business suit sat with his arms crossed tightly, jaw clenched, not in resistance, but in recognition. A black woman in the third row whispered into her clasped hands. He had a name. The feed stayed there. No panel, no red ticker, just people witnessing truth. And that's when Jasmine stepped back into the frame. Not to grandstand, not to gloat, but because silence, too, needed a shape. She stood where Jeanine had sat. She didn't take the chair. She stood behind it. America has always had a problem with truth, she said quietly. Not because we don't have enough of it, but because we keep paying people not to speak it. No applause followed. None was needed. I didn't come here to win an argument. I came to lift a name. She paused. Malik Richardson. Then, as the camera zoomed slowly toward her, she said, "We can't resurrect the dead, but we can choose whether or not we bury their stories with them." A single voice in the back whispered, "Amen." That was it. No grand ending, just that. And across the country, millions of screens stayed lit long after the broadcast ended, holding still frames, pausing moments, sharing links with trembling fingers. It wasn't a segment anymore. It was a shift. By the time dusk fell across the Capitol, the fallout had already begun. Jeanine Pirro's name trended beneath Malik Richardson's on every major platform, an inverse of power, a reversal of visibility. The hashtags told the story the anchors couldn't. In the green glow of millions of smartphones, a different America was emerging, one that didn't need studio lights or gatekeepers to validate the truth. And at the heart of it all, frozen in 1,000 screenshots, stood Jasmine Crockett, calm, dark-suited, and immovable. By 6:17 p.m., the White House issued a statement, cautious, non-committal. We urge further transparency and will support any inquiry into the matter. By 7:02, Fox News Legal released a short memo of its own, claiming that any agreement signed in 2016 reflected editorial discretion, not censorship. But few believed it, because by 7:48 p.m., Tanya Richardson spoke. From her porch in Dallas, wrapped in a hoodie far too thin for the cold, she addressed a crowd of journalists and neighbors gathered around her front yard. "My son didn't ask to be a symbol," she said. "He just wanted to come home from the store." She held up her phone showing the footage, but they didn't let him, and then they didn't let the world see him. Her voice cracked, but not her spine. "Miss Crockett saw him, and now so do you." That clip would be viewed over 14 million times in 24 hours. But in that moment, Jasmine wasn't watching the views climb. She sat alone once again in a quiet hotel room with her phone on the nightstand, screen glowing dimly, vibrating every few seconds. She didn't answer the calls, not yet. Her fingers scrolled through the comments under the footage. She brought the receipts, and the silence broke. "I was 17 in 2016. This could have been me. This is what justice sounds like when it finds its voice. Malik, we see you now." She stopped on one from a verified user she didn't recognize. It read, "You didn't come to debate. You came to deliver a verdict." That part made her pause, because it was true. She hadn't gone on Jeanine's show to argue. She had gone to name what had been erased. Behind her, the muted TV still played the coverage. Legal analysts, civil rights leaders, political commentators, all of them suddenly remembering Malik Richardson, rushing to reframe their silence. But Jasmine didn't need their spin. She had the original. On her phone, she opened the last text she'd received from Tanya 3 days earlier. "Don't let them rewrite him. Please." And she hadn't. Far from the media towers and Twitter wars, a protest had formed in downtown Dallas. Candles lined the sidewalk. A mural in progress covered the side of a parking garage. It was Malik's face, half smile, one headphone in. Beside it, someone had painted the words, "You stayed silent for a check." The quote wasn't credited. It didn't need to be. Everyone knew. And in that silence, Jasmine Crockett had done the unthinkable. She'd shifted the narrative without ever raising her voice. She'd brought a boy back into the light, not with rage, but with truth, slow and sharp as a blade. By morning, the reckoning was no longer confined to the internet. New York Times ran the story above the fold. Media silence, racial violence, and a $350,000 payout. The Crockett disclosure. MSNBC aired Jasmine's confrontation in full, back-to-back with Malik's footage. No commentary. Even conservative outlets found themselves scrambling for position. Some downplaying, others distancing, but none denying. The pressure had turned systemic. And still, Jasmine Crockett remained quiet. She hadn't spoken since her final words in the studio. Not to the press, not to her staff, not even to the sympathetic senators and civil rights lawyers flooding her inbox with praise and requests. She wasn't interested in becoming the story. She had already told it. But the country wasn't done listening. In Chicago, a coalition of Black mothers announced the formation of a new advocacy group, Witness Keepers, dedicated to re-examining cases of media-suppressed police violence. Malik's name was first on their letterhead. In Atlanta, students at Spelman held a 7-minute moment of silence for each year Malik's case had gone unseen. In Los Angeles, a surprise tribute was projected across the CNN building. A giant image of Jasmine holding up the NDA, underneath it the words, "Justice doesn't expire." And in South Dallas, Tanya Richardson opened her mailbox to find a letter with no return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper, handwritten in slow, almost nervous print. "I was on the other end of that newsroom. I wanted to say something. I didn't. I'm sorry. I'm not staying quiet anymore." Tanya folded the note gently, placed it inside a plastic sleeve, and added it to the binder where she'd kept Malik's school pictures, report cards, and the last text he ever sent her. "Be home soon. Want wings?" She whispered back to the page, "You're already home, baby." Meanwhile, the network launched an internal investigation. Emails from 2016 began leaking, some referencing editorial risk, others attaching spreadsheets detailing the cost-benefit of covering volatile incidents. One line hit particularly hard. "Too urban, too soon, too risky for our brand." And suddenly, Jeanine wasn't the only one under fire. Producers, legal counsels, executive vice presidents, they all felt the aftershock. But Jasmine, she stayed above it, not by retreating, but by remaining steady. That afternoon, she issued a written statement. It was short, only 147 words. "Justice is not vengeance. Justice is visibility." What we saw on that footage was not new. What was new was the silence breaking. Let this not be the last time truth interrupts power. For Malik, and for every mother who keeps the lights on at night in case their child makes it home, this was never about a segment. It was about being seen. The rest is up to you. She signed it not as Congresswoman, not as attorney, but simply Jasmine. And when reporters finally caught her outside her D.C. office 2 days later, they asked the question she'd been dodging. "Do you think Jeanine Pirro should resign?" Jasmine paused, glanced at the crowd, and said, "No, I think she should watch the footage again. This time all the way through." Then she turned and walked inside. That evening, Jeanine's primetime slot aired a rerun. Viewers turned elsewhere, to a new live stream, where Tanya Richardson sat between two empty chairs and read aloud from Malik's old journals, page by page, voice steady, and on the bottom of one worn notebook cover, in his own looping handwriting, he had written, "One day the world will know me." He was right, because Jasmine Crockett had made sure of it. In a country where power often masks itself in respectability and justice hides behind paywalls and contracts, Jasmine Crockett reminded us of something elemental. Truth doesn't need volume. It needs courage. She didn't storm the gates. She didn't plead. She opened a folder, held the silence steady, and let the nation see what it had chosen to forget. This was never just about Jeanine Pirro, or Fox, or even one check. It was about the economy of erasure, the quiet agreements that silence the deaths of Black boys, the media machines that choose digestibility over dignity, the way justice isn't lost in violence, but in the deal that follows. And yet, against all of that, one woman stood still enough to let the evidence speak. Jasmine didn't rescue Malik's memory. She resurrected it. She gave it the space to breathe. And in doing so, she handed the microphone back to a mother, a movement, and a country unsure how to carry both guilt and grief. Because justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just shows up with the documents. If this story moved you, challenged you, or simply made you think deeper, don't keep it to yourself. Comment below with your thoughts. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you're ready for more truths told in silence. And if you believe these stories deserve light, hit like, not for us, but for those still unheard. This story is a fictionalized and dramatized narrative. Any resemblance to real events or individuals beyond public record is purely coincidental.